Ladies and gentlemen, Sean O'Brien of the Teamsters is here. I wanted to say it's an honor to have you here on the broadcast. I'm very excited to talk to you. We already had a wonderful conversation once on your podcast. It's gonna be coming out soon, right? In the next couple of days, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it's going to be Better Bad Ideas with Sean O'Brien. We're going to be launching on January 15th. So make sure you tune in onto YouTube and all the social media platforms. But most importantly, you're the first and most important guest. So I
Hell yeah!
appreciate you doing that, so it's important for us.
Who are some of the other guests that you're going to be having? If you don't mind me asking, if you don't want to, if you don't mind
No,
leaking.
absolutely. I mean, some of the guests we're going to have Casey Affleck. We're also going to have the 3 Olympic hockey players from the Miracle on Ice from Boston, Jack O'Callaghan, Mike Eruzione, and Dave Silk all together. And we're going to hopefully have senators like Josh Hawley, Bernie Sanders, a very diverse group of politicians. Also, we're going to focus on celebrities and any and all people that help and shape America. So we're very excited about the podcast. We're very excited about diversity, but more importantly, we're most excited about having conversations uninhibited and not scripted.
Hell yeah! I just wanted to ask who the other guests were to see who I'm more important than by your own estimation. But it's wonderful to have you here, Sean. Like I said, we had a great conversation. And what I wanted to talk about today, considering that there's a lot going on in the world of specifically labor news, I wanted to ask you a couple questions, if you don't mind me asking. Specifically, starting with some of the NLRB decisions that happened, where it was reported that the Democratic Party kind of dropped the ball. I'm just going right into it, by the way, where there was an opportunity for the Democratic Party to continue controlling the NLRB for the next 2 years, and unfortunately, that fell apart. And I wanted to hear what your opinion was on that.
Yeah, there was a reappointment effort to keep one of the Democratic appointees on there, and it couldn't get done, and it's unfortunate. But the reality of it is there was a key opportunity to, and look, I think it's important to note the NLRB needs to be revamped. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And in my world, the Teamsters world, we've been avoiding the NLRB as much as possible. I mean, I think if you pay attention to what's been going on for the last 2.5 years, although we have gotten some good decisions, we try and just put the pressure on employers to either recognize us voluntarily, or in some cases, like in DHL and other areas like Cisco or Republic Waste, we strike for recognition. We've done that at Amazon. We have marches on the bosses at the DSPs. So whoever is in that NLRB, I think regardless of who's there, we've got to revamp them. I think, being at the table, having the conversations, being part of the process is important, and we're hopefully optimistic we can do that. I mean, look, we can't keep focusing on missed opportunities. We just got to play with the cards we're dealt and figure it out. And I think that's what we're prepared to do.
There's a Ro Khanna tweet from this issue specifically from January 7th, where he says, "We then failed to get the word to Vice President Harris quickly enough to come and deliver the tie-breaking vote. In the 90 minutes that transpired, Senator Manchin returned first, swinging the vote in the other direction and ceding the NLRB to Republican control 2 years earlier than necessary. These procedural blunders have massive implications for the American people, who deserve better from their elected officials. American workers deserve an explanation." Now, regardless of your opinion on the NLRB overall, it seems like Kamala Harris still had the opportunity to deliver a tie-breaking vote and chose or was not there to cast that vote. What is that? Does that track with at least your immediate involvement with Kamala Harris? Because you've been in rooms where you directly talk to Kamala Harris as well for labor specific issues.
I mean, look, if you miss the bell or you don't show up for work in the real world, you're in trouble, right? But there's no consequences for her. She should have been there. She should have done the right thing. And this is what the problem has been all along. Ro Khanna has been a great advocate for working people. I spent a lot of time with him. And look, he'd have the inside track on what actually happened. But if you're expected to be there and you can actually make an influential decision, then be there regardless of whether you won the election or not. Now we can speculate, or I could speculate. Maybe she didn't care because she lost. I don't know whether that's true or not, but based upon my experiences and based upon the election results, maybe she just doesn't care anymore. And elections have consequences, and it's clearly a consequence of an election.
Yeah. So here's the other side of the story. So in terms of Josh Hawley, you've talked about him with we even had a conversation about Josh Hawley where you believe that he is you had a conversation with him. You believe that he's committed to the statements that we've heard from him very publicly about supporting labor unions. And I guess the question I have is, or at least the fears I have, and this is echoed by my friend Alex Press as well, that with the Trump-backed NLRB appointments or new NLRB judges, do you feel like there is something to fear with respect to the judges potentially opposing the Teamsters argument that Amazon is a joint employer of its drivers, specifically the ones that we're talking about with the strikes that are happening or were happening all around the country?
I mean, the fear of the unknown obviously is not a comfortable position to be in. We're hopefully optimistic by having conversations with people like Josh Hawley, working bipartisan across the aisle, that we can convince and also support previous rulings that have determined they are in fact a joint employer. So time will tell, but I will say this about Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley, since the day we've been working with him, hasn't wavered on anything that we've asked him to do. He showed up at picket lines in Missouri. And look, there's a lot of Democrats that haven't done the right thing either. I mean, you mentioned Joe Manchin. That guy is.
Oh yeah.
Thank God he's leaving. I mean, talk about being bought and paid for. I mean, that guy comes from a blue collar state that went right to work. And he flip flops more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. Matter of fact, when my first time down in D.C., probably the first week I was living here, I was in a supermarket, and I don't go to self checkouts because they eliminate jobs. And I looked over, and there was Joe Manchin in a self checkout, while the line for a regular cashier was about 13 people deep. And it just goes to show you that it's all about him. And thank
Maybe
God
he was
he's
trying to
gone.
steal.
You never know. I mean, they do have sticky fingers, some of those guys.
Oh yeah. Okay, I want to run this by you. I've made an argument time and time again for Democratic leadership to utilize federal regulatory agencies against some of the Democratic Party members that refuse to play ball when they're whipping votes. And this isn't necessarily to I guess politicize the federal agencies, but it's to simply enforce the regulatory mechanisms that are existing upon members of Congress, regardless of their party affiliation. Joe Manchin, I think, is a fantastic target for a conflict of interest, whether it be his. I believe his daughter is a big pharmaceutical executive that has dealings with the state that Joe Manchin is obviously was a senator in West Virginia. His brother, I believe, also operates coal mines. So not only do these guys engage in a lot of insider trading, they also have direct involvement with a lot of these companies, and I think it deserves investigation. What do you think about what do you think about utilizing these government agencies against politicians to make sure that they also are treated like regular citizens are? Because if there was this sort of corruption, this sort of rampant corruption being conducted by regular citizens, you would expect the government agencies to actually deal with them, right, and investigate them.
I mean, there's no doubt rules and regulations are there for a reason. They should be enforced across the board, regardless of who you are or what you do. And you make great points about conflict of interest. I mean, you can look at Joe Manchin. You can look at Chuck Schumer. I mean, you look at all the egregious violations that have happened to our workers, our members that work at Amazon, and come to find out taken donations from Amazon. He's not the only one. There's a lot of Democrats and Republicans that are taking donations, but his daughter's a big lobbyist for Amazon. Wouldn't
Yeah.
sign off on an Amazon letter for DSP, wouldn't sign off on a support letter when we were on the verge of striking UPS. So, Manchin's not the only one. There's a lot of questionable ethics going on all around. And to your point, if there's checks and balances, there's a reason for checks and balances. And look, rules and regulations are no different than a collective bargaining agreement. If you don't enforce that collective bargaining agreement and utilize the enforcement and the mechanisms to right a wrong, then it's no different in the federal government if you're not utilizing the process and the agencies to fix corruptions and bad behavior, more importantly. And it should be an example. I mean, look, these elected officials should be viewed upon as elite leadership of the greatest nation in the world, and they should be held accountable so that everybody else, no matter what they do, no matter what rules and regulations are in place, that they follow those rules and regulations. They should be the example.
Absolutely. I want to switch gears here for a second and ask you about, and I don't know if you don't want to talk about this at all, but I want to ask about what Trump has said specifically about UAW leadership, specifically Sean Fain. Do you feel like, especially considering that Elon Musk obviously has crosshairs on him as well, do you feel like there will be any additional repercussions coming from the incoming administration against them? Because there are obviously a lot of people that are in positions of power now that have put crosshairs on him and the UAW as well.
Yeah, I haven't specifically spoke. I have spoken to President-elect Trump, but I haven't spoken specifically about Sean Fain, the UAW, or any other union at all. I mean, what I've tried to do, and I think we've been successful, is try and have conversations in a broader sense about what's important to labor, what's important to working people. And I think whether people agree or disagree, because no matter what you do in any situation, there's always going to be spectators that have never engaged in the sport that are going to be on the sidelines critiquing you and telling you how you should play the game. But I think what's important is that, you look at the nominee for Secretary of Labor. Now, people can say, we'll see what she's going to do, but she's taken some positions. Not every position she's taken has supported labor, but the ones that count, like the PRO Act and everything else, that happened because of conversations that I specifically had with President-elect Trump and convincing him that, what was said during the election from the Republican side and also himself, as far as, we want to support working people, we're not against labor unions, that this was an opportunity for him to make a bold move to make this appointment. In a perfect world, I would love everybody to embrace and agree with everything everybody does, but it doesn't happen. As far as retribution, retaliation, I can't speak to that because I don't know what the history is. I know about retribution and retaliation because when I spoke at the RNC, there was no secret that the far left and a lot of these politicians, senators, Democratic senators and elected, came after me fast and furious, and that's okay. But as far as what in Sean Fain's future as it relates to a relationship with Donald Trump, I mean, I think you'd have to ask Donald Trump. I mean, the one thing that I pride myself on is, and I think you know this, Hasan, you being the first guest, and I appreciate that. Again, I can't thank you enough. But, I don't get into name calling. I don't get into saying anything else. But I know, hearing from different opinions when, you're berating someone, whether it's Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or anybody else personally, I think people take that very personally. But I don't know what that means. I mean, what are you hearing?
So I do actually. It's a great question because I wanted to ask you specifically not about what Trump is slated to do, but also given your experience in a leadership role in obviously the Teamsters is a massive union. There is a lot of outside noise right now, it seems, against Sean, and some noise utilizing like discontent within the union as well. Many people, this is from Alex Press, many people speaking out against Sean Fain are supporters of the admin caucus that, of course, may not have played all that great of a role in the initial phases of in the UAW, and are potentially looking to team up with Donald Trump. So, given your experience, I wanted to hear what you thought about that, considering that there might be people in Trump's orbit that will work to basically get Sean out of the leadership position, going around and talking about like Sean Fain being corrupt. But even though those corruption charges are just they have no like real legal standing, and it seems like there's a lot of wrecker behavior being exhibited by parties that are more self-interested. And considering your experience, I wanted to hear if you've heard anything about this, if you've seen anything like this, and what would that look like if there was any sort of internal dynamics here?
I think
Battle.
I try not to get involved in any other union's politics, but what I have read, obviously there was a DOJ. There was been articles in numerous media outlets that said there was a DOJ investigation about inappropriations or anything else, and I'm not sure where that's coming from, but that was over the summer and I think early or late spring. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. I would assume. I don't know about a partnership with the Trump administration or anything else like that, but I would assume, there's some controversy. There's some controversy probably within the membership. I mean, from what I know of his membership, he represents auto workers, which are very hardworking backbone of this country, and he also represents
grad students,
professors and grad students, and everything else. So, of course, two different worlds, right? Two different opinions on a lot of things. So I would assume a lot of the criticisms and or attacks against Sean Fain are coming internally, where people may be looking for allies externally to try and achieve goals of getting him out of leadership. That's my unqualified opinion, not knowing the politics. I could talk about the Teamsters Union, the politics. Look, I'm sure there's people, and I know there's people that didn't agree with our position in this election, and that's okay. That's the beauty of being in a democratic union. That's the beauty of being an American. But at the end of the day, a lot of this rhetoric, a lot of these accusations that I incurred and that Brother Fain's incurring now, could be some internal forces that don't agree with how his organization is being run. So, it's all comes down to politics at the end of the day. We've got politics in the United States, and we also got union politics. And I always tell people it's a full contact sport, and elections bring the worst out in people.
So, okay, last question about Fain before I move on. But I wanted to hear what you think personally about his leadership over the past couple of years. Like, look, it's not. I'm a fan. But I wanted to, considering your experience as a union leader, I wanted to hear if you'd elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he did a good job through the strike. I mean, he took down 3 of the major automakers. I think he got I don't know the ins and outs of the contract. You hear different things, and I haven't had a conversation with him about what was achieved and what was not achieved. I think politically coming in, I know this because I met with Sean early on when they won. I met with him and his team, and he won a tough election by only 500 votes. Yeah. And I look at, you asked me about, my opinion when we ran, I think a year before Sean Fain and his team ran. We beat our opposition, which basically was an incumbent opposition because it was a Hoffa design slate. I mean, we beat them 3-1. So, to Sean's credit, I mean, the one thing that we did, we didn't have to do as much of, is it was clear who the choice was in the Teamsters Union to lead this great union. It was the Oz team, right? To his credit, I mean, when you win an international election by only 500 votes, not only do you got to worry about taking on the employers and getting results and delivering on promises that you committed to, But you also got to unite a union that completely is divided, and only winning by 500 votes put him at a disadvantage. I think he did a good job of what he had to work with. I'm sure he doesn't agree with a lot of the stuff I did as a general president. I personally wouldn't get up and you know, uh, you know, get personal with people. I'd rather debate the issues. And everything he did, I think he did with the mindset it was in the best interest of his members. And hopefully that the DOJ investigation doesn't prove wrong. Hopefully his membership unites. But that's not my politics. That's not my union. And look, I commend him for having the courage and conviction to strike the big three when it never happened before.
Hell yeah. So switching gears, I want to talk about the state of labor unions and union participation in the American economy. It's not a secret that while it seems that there is more positive opinions about labor unions right now, union participation is still at a historically low rate. This is virtually every single poll that covers this stuff shows that people are overwhelmingly pro-union, but union density is as low as it's been in the past couple of decades. You have 10% in the private sector, or you have 10% overall, but in the private sector it's around 6%. And Alex Press also wanted to ask the question: how does the labor movement grow that number to what it needs to be to ensure workers themselves have actual power, which is around 40 to 60% density?
Well, I think it's important, number one, is to have a plan and have a plan that's going to work. And I can speak specific to the Teamsters Union. I think you've seen, and I don't really know Alex personally. I don't know what her background is. I know that she's very pro-labor, very pro-UAW, has been critical of me at certain decisions. But the one thing that you can't dispute is the fact that we organized 70,000 new members in 2.5 years. We negotiated the strongest historic contracts, UPS being the biggest, a $30 billion deal with the largest increase ever. And that has had a snowball effect in many other industries and any and all industries that we represent. I think part of the problem, it comes down to politics as well. Electing the right people that are going to help pass legislation like the PRO Act or something in that form of the PRO Act that makes it easier for people to join a union, makes it easier where there's no threats of retribution or retaliation. I think another thing that's very, very important is, people don't realize that, social media is a great, great communication platform, but it also can be a huge weapon as well. A lot of people get on there and they'll, demonize their local unions. They'll demonize their international unions. And, if you're reading about disgruntled situations or you're hearing from disgruntled people, that doesn't help when social media is just so much available. And I'm not suggesting gag orders or anything else like that, but I'm just suggesting, look, you've got an organization that you belong to, whether it's right or wrong, and you agree that you don't, but the product is, setting industry standards, setting standards around the country. Put your differences and your opinions aside and focus on upholding those industry standards and organizing new members. Sometimes we obviously cause our own demise in certain situations. And I know one of the biggest things that we've focused on as a leadership team is making sure that we have member-to-member engagement. We utilize our rank and file members that work in similar industries to go out there and have conversations with people that work non-union, that do the same job, and highlight the benefits of working under a collective bargaining agreement, the wages, the benefits, more importantly, the respect and dignity and the protections. And, I think, there's a number of situations or things that will help grow the union density. I think what's important also is embracing this next generation because I mean the 18 to 35-year-olds, hell, I wish I was 25 years younger right now because man, do those guys and gals want to fight. You look at Chipotle, you look at Starbucks, you look at a lot of these industries, and it's energizing for an old guy like me in the labor movement. And I think we've got to utilize the best tools we have, and that's rank and file, worker to worker members. And we've got to get away from pointing fingers and not embracing and learning from our defeats, but learning from how we can be better and have different strategies. So we've mandated, and we tell this to all the time. Every time I get to speak in front of a local union or a joint council or any body of union members, especially when I'm dealing with rank and file members, I always challenge them to say, look, your local has 4,000 members, your local has 10,000 members, or your local may have 2,000 members. You need to deliver 10% of new members every single day. And the only way that's going to happen is if you give true testimonials of how important and how better it is to work under a union contract. So, we also, all of us have to have skin in the game.
I think social media can play a big role in uplifting this message as well. But
podcasts. Did I mention I have a podcast coming out? Just checking.
Yeah. But what, in your mind, what do you think is the biggest hurdle to overcome in terms of increasing labor union participation?
Well, I think the biggest hurdle is, these union busters. I mean, these union busters, captive audience meetings, when you think about it, and I've done every job in the union from rank and file all the way up, organizing is the toughest job in the entire labor movement. And I think if we don't get legislation and protection against union busters, which I believe is about a $500 million per year business, and the captive audience meetings, banning them. I mean, a lot of states have done some good work on that, but it's got to be a nationwide approach. Then I think that will help tremendously because, look, think about this. As a union organizer, you may get access an hour and a half per week with these members or with these potential members, where the employer has complete access 8 to 10 hours per day, and they have internal messaging and everything else. So banning those captive audience meetings, eliminating or making it illegal to union bust, I think that would help tremendously.
Okay, absolutely. A question from the audience is from Virtual Meal says, I wanted to ask Sean about how to unionize in normally non-unionized sectors, more specifically in software and engineering. It is a concern many of us in the field express, and there is not guidance from our employers on unions, and there have been thousands of layoffs with no protections for workers in these fields.
Well, I can tell you this, the employer is never going to advocate
for
you being represented by a union. So which is a great segue into, what I'm going to say next is, anybody that wants to organize, you shouldn't do it through your employer. Conversely, there's a great opportunity, I believe, in the tech industry. I believe there's a great opportunity to organize in non-traditional industries. I think what you need to do is contact a local union, whether it's the Teamsters, whether it's UAW, whether it's SEIU, AFSCME, or anybody, and start the dialogue. But I would just caution, never trust an employer. I don't care if it's your best friend. They're going to protect against one thing, and it's going to be the bottom line of their balance sheet. It's not going to be about what's in the best interest of workers. But, the other thing too, in those tech industries, and I think we all have friends that work in them and maybe have relatives that work in them, there's no loyalty, and there's no better industry that's ripe to be organized. Because look, if you're at a tech industry, a tech company, I have a friend of mine, ironically, I just worked out with him a couple of days ago, and he's been in sales, software sales for a company, Oracle, for 20 years. And they gave him an alternative. They weren't eliminating his job, but they were going to lay him off because they were getting a 22-year-old, a 23-year-old right out of college that was going to do his job for half the money. And I believe that's running prevalent in those sectors, especially the white collar sales job tech industries. And so, you're 22 years old right now, and you get a job where you're making 80 and 90,000. You have no protections of a union contract. You have no say in your benefits. You have no say in what you do. 30 years goes by pretty quick. You could be that friend of mine that I just worked out in the gym that doesn't have a defined benefit pension plan, that doesn't have retiree medical, although he might have made a little bit more money. He's leaving with nothing. And that's what the loyalty to a company like Oracle gave to him. He's basically doing odd jobs right now to survive. So I think if anywhere, that industry is ripe for the picking. Just contact a local union and get together.
That was great. Thank you. Also, as far as I understand, there is ongoing talks with Costco with the Teamsters, and it seems to me that as recently as this past month, Costco has walked away from the bargaining table. Yesterday, Costco executives abruptly ended collective bargaining negotiations with the Teamsters, refusing to engage with a series of fair and practical proposals. And I wanted to hear what your perspective was on Costco specifically, especially considering that despite its record high profits, Costco is oftentimes seen as like a relatively pro labor company. But just like you said, no company is at the end of the day pro labor; they're pro profits. What do you think about what's going on there?
Well, what they just put out there in the news media or wherever they put it out, they're full of shit. It's fiction. And, Costco, listen, I'll tell you the whole problem with Costco. And it's a corruptible problem that was enabled by the previous administration. And, Costco has always fancied themselves as, worker friendly, pro union, embracing unionization. And that is furthest from the truth. There's 18,000 Costco employees represented by the Teamsters Union with the potential of 125,000 to be represented. And it's funny, when we took over, their whole attitude has changed. And, they thought that it was going to be the same old. When I say they, the employer. And we had an organizing drive, I believe, in Local 822. James Wright is one of my vice presidents in Virginia. And for a company that was so pro-union and embraced their workforce and appreciate it, I've never seen a more aggressive anti-union campaign launched against us. And we fought real fucking hard. We spent a lot of money. We won that. And we accreted them to the national agreement. And it was good that happened because we exposed them. They're actually suffering from a disease called diabetes, right? And they should be actually telling the truth that they don't want the Teamsters Union, that they don't want to allow us to organize. So I went to the first opening negotiations in November, and I'll tell you, I'm a person, a leader that believes in leading from the front. I believe in discipline and having respect. Whether I like you or I don't like you, you're my opponent. I'm going to respect you until it's time not to respect you. So we sit down at these negotiations. They show up 45 minutes late. We have our whole negotiating committee rank and file there. And I ask them right across the table before we even start, let me ask you fools something. If one of our members showed up late for work, what do you do to them? We write them up. I said, what's going to be your consequences? And they laughed and joked. I said, I'm going to be very clear and very transparent with you that you better take these negotiations seriously because it's not going to be like it is. We are not going beyond the expiration date of January 31st. And we will strike your ass if you don't give us card check neutrality. Are you willing to give us card check neutrality? This was in November or October. And they said, we really don't believe in that. So
I thought they were pro-labor. What happened?
Right, exactly. So we got up and we walked out and we told them, we'll see you 30 days before the contract expires. What is not being reported is that thankfully we got almost a $350 million strike and defense fund. So last night I was on the phone with our lead negotiator and our legal counsel, and we are going to, through a general executive board decision, pay each and every worker, if there is a strike, $1,000 per week. So they're not going to be financially compromised, our members. Their families aren't going to be compromised. And we are going to take it to the street and make an example. And we're going to make them be a pro-worker, pro-union company, one way or the other. You can guarantee that.
Hell yeah. That's
And the
amazing.
same with United Airlines. You know, United Airlines is another big battle we have going on.
Yeah.
Where, you know, again, greed, not appreciating our members, thinking that it's going to be the same old, hiding behind an antiquated Railway Labor Act that keeps moving the goal line every time. I mean, I just wish for once we could just strike them hard. And we will at some point.
Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, if you could elaborate on car check neutrality for those in the audience, why is it so important to have car check neutrality? What is car check neutrality?
Well, car check neutrality is basically when you get the majority of representation cards. So when you're organizing a company and it's authorization, you're getting authorization from the employees to petition for representation through the National Labor Relations Board. So that basically gives the ability to file cards under the National Labor Relations Act. When you get the majority of the cards, there's a lot of good employers out there that if you get the majority of the cards, meaning that if there's 100 workers and you have 75 cards, you know, signed out of 100, and you go to the employer and say, look, do you want to go through this drawn out process where we potentially could strike you for recognition? And or do you want to sit down, you value your workers, voluntarily recognize our your employees, our potential members, and let's sit down and work out a contract. So it kind of eliminates the process. Well, it does eliminate the process of the National Labor Relations Boards. In some cases, we've had card check with companies where you both agree on a third-party arbitrator to verify the people that are in the unit and verify the numbers, and then you sit down and negotiate a contract. And it's a great process, but it's also a great litmus test to see how embracing employers are of welcoming unions.
In the tier of being open to unionization, I would say that obviously even asking for a third party arbitration is going to be still an additional layer of stopping the unionization process, even though it's obviously still better than trying to actively combat it and taking it up to the NLRB. And the best possible outcome is that they immediately say, okay, we're open to it, right?
Right. And then you sit down and the tough part right now is in any and all negotiations under the current system is, let's say you organize a company traditionally through the National Labor Relations Board, you win that election. I think the average is 406 days if you're successful to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement for the first time. But what exists no matter what through that process, especially if it was a contentious organizing drive victory, is that employer will continue to stall, will continue to intimidate workers while you're going through that process of collective bargaining. So that's why it's important that, we've got to have laws that protect workers, not just during the organizing campaign, but throughout the process of collective bargaining, but also having a mechanism, an arbitration, decide, obviously rule on a first contract if the parties can't agree on it, meaning that, we come to impasse, then you submit it to an arbitrator. And I think that's a version of the PRO Act so that people can actually achieve that goal of getting the first contract.
Is there, I don't want to ask anything that's like tricky, but is there any sort of educational efforts behind educating the rank and file on the importance of political participation when it comes down to applying even pressure as individuals, not as representatives of the union, but as individual American voters? Is there any sort of education on like the voice that they might have outside of labor unions and strikes in terms of organizing in their own communities and potentially applying pressure to their own politicians in an effort to make sure that this sort of legislation does pass?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to any other organization but what we've been doing. And I know there's a lot of great labor organizations out there that have, political action, political education. And I know that we have been focused on political education and education, more importantly, empowering our members to have those conversations with the representative that they elect within their communities. A lot of politicians, and I've seen this having to live in D.C. when I talk about politicians, legislatures, primarily senators and Congress people, they spend more time uh, uh, with the bureaucracy in D.C. rather than in their communities actually talking to the people that they're elected and paid for to represent. And I think what we've been doing, and I know what we've been doing, is encouraging accountability uh, on behalf of our members by, getting them involved. We've got a pretty aggressive program at the IBT, where we've got statewide coordinators that we dispatch to talk to our members, to craft messaging in education. So, yeah, to your point, especially in light of what's happened over the last year and what potentially needs to happen moving forward, there's no better example of engagement of rank and file members that live in the communities where these politicians are paid to represent their best interest. And in many cases, the best interest in a lot of these communities is supporting collective bargaining, supporting unionization. So, to your question, long way around, yes, absolutely we do. And we think that's very important to the success of unions and the success of the middle class.
Um, okay, we don't have a lot of time left, and thank you so much for coming on. But I wanted to ask one final question. This is from, I believe, a rank and filer from the Chicago Fire Department. As you might have heard, and I remember encountering a picket during the DNC. The Chicago Firefighters Union is working with no contract at this point for over 3 years. And they keep getting pushed around and steamrolled by the city with no end in sight. And because they are a firefighters union, they're a no strike union. And I guess the question I have for you as a prominent labor leader, is there any advice that you might have for labor unions that work in these sectors that are obviously incredibly important for public health and safety, and therefore have a lot of these like no strike clauses?
Well,
Like, is there?
first off, anybody that doesn't give public, first responders in the public sector, the best contract that they possibly could get and want to play games with them, they should be allowed to strike. I know that
Yeah,
they're not allowed to, but look, in the firefighters, I love the firefighters union. I think Eddie Kelly is a great leader. The advice, I mean, again, we just talked about a political action. I mean, again, we are electing these people that are deciding on and negotiating and deciding on our contracts. At the end of the day, I mean, I think you just got to be vigilant. Look, no politician, no governor, no mayor, no city councilor wants any type of public negative exposure, especially with firefighters. I mean, look,
yeah.
every bad situation that possibly could happen, those are the first men and women that show up. I mean, it's fucking criminal if that's happening. And look, get on the platform, get on the social media platform. Get out there, be at city council meetings, be at events, and don't be afraid to let your voices be heard. I mean, it's ludicrous, absolute ludicrous. You look at what's going on in LA right now. I mean, these firefighters, they're heroes. They are fucking heroes. And, they don't, a lot of these firefighters, this isn't just a job to them. It's a passion. It's a lifestyle, and they should be rewarded accordingly.
Yeah. Especially with respect to wildfire prevention brigades that work at the federal level. From what I understand, I have some members of this community that do that. They've reported that their wages are insanely low. They get actually the lowest possible wage that you could get from the federal government. Sometimes around like the starting salary being around $50,000 a year. There are reports of some of the wildfire fighters actually having to live in their cars because there's just like it's impossible for them to operate in the areas and live in those same areas because the real estate marketplace is obviously devastating. Um, is there any way for these sectors? Not to say, by the way, that like obviously the Teamsters uh, are in a less valuable position in terms of like the importance that they have in the logistics in our supply chain. Every part of the labor force is important equally. But for many of these sectors where they can't strike, what is the what can they do? Like what would you recommend that people do
Well,
aside from
we can be
getting the
very
word out?
creative. Look, the one thing that is prevalent and not always practiced in the labor movement is solidarity. So I think it's important to find ways to utilize partners in labor in the private sector to help in that fight in the public sector without obviously incriminating myself or anybody else. But there's always creative ways to get a message sent on behalf of people that may not have the same rights and conditions to strike. So if you can read between the lines, I would suggest that the Chicago firefighters reach out to a very strong leader in Chicago, Local 705 Juan Campos, and I'm certain you can be very creative in your fight together.
Hell yeah. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Sean O'Brien, for coming on. And I'm very excited for your podcast to come out. We had a wonderful, very productive conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to say as your
No,
final words?
I really appreciate you coming on there. We are launching the Better Bad Ideas by with Sean O'Brien on January 15th. Yours truly, right there, will be the first guest. And please tune in again. That's Sean O'Brien. Better Bad Ideas with Sean O'Brien.
All right. Thank you so much, Sean.
Great. Thank you very
I
much.
hope to have you on. Maybe we can work out one of these days.
Yeah, we're supposed to work out. You got some dental work done, I understand.
Yeah.
And I'm a victim of like 6 implants, so I know what's up.
Yeah. It was. Hey, at least you got good dental coverage, though. That's good.
Thank God for the union.
Hell yeah. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you, brother.
Bye. All right, that was Sean O'Brien, leader of the Teamsters Union. What an incredible conversation that was. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully, next time he's out in Los Angeles, we'll try to do a workout stream together.